Hello and welcome to the Storytelling for the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Kanata, and this is the place we talk about all things expressive writing and other creative techniques, all with a little bit of Buffy the Vampire Slayer thrown in. Buckle up and enjoy. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode, which is a little bit different. However, to remain true to the podcast intro, I do every now and again have to speak about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which, if you are listening to this like me, you probably think it is the best or one of the best TV shows to ever have been created. Now, I've done a lot of rewatching individual Buffy episodes here and there throughout my life. So all the typical ones that everybody knows and loves. Once More with Feeling, Hush, Anne is one of my favorites, Graduation Day Part 1 and 2, the whole deal. However, I just have never really had the time until now. I'm currently 37, so I'm nearing middle age, to do a full rewatch of the series. So as I record this, I'm currently up to episode 3 of season 5. And I have to say, rewatching Buffy as an adult with much more life experience and context that some things in life just don't go to plan is such a different experience. Now, I don't want this to be too long, and I'll record another episode once I actually get through season 7 as well, and I've done literally a full rewatch. However, there are some things that have really struck a chord with me that when I was watching Buffy the first time around, which would have been, I remember being in around grade 6 when season 1 was on TV. Now, season 1 is nowhere near as dark and dramatic as some of the latter seasons. So I recall it being on at about 7:30 p.m. and watching it here and there. I mean, I didn't control the TV at home, obviously, because I was a kid at that point. But I do remember seeing it on in the background and instantly being drawn to the whole concept. And what I love about Buffy the most is that basically it flips Hollywood on its head. And it's really good at doing that. And it does that from basically day 1, scene 1. And you'll know what I'm talking about, where Darla is with the guy in the high school. And of course, everybody is waiting for the guy to attack her. And then it turns out Darla is a vampire and she attacks and kills him. So it's established very early on that Buffy is not your typical TV show. And I just love it. And I know that some of the effects haven't aged all that well. However, I feel like the storylines and the story arcs have aged really, really well. And some of the things that I kind of thought were a bit lame upon first viewing, as a 37-year-old, and given everything that's happened since when I first watched it to now in 2025, I thought, wow, that is actually a really interesting and fascinating concept. So, season 1 has to be one of my favorite seasons. I get it. It was low budget. The effects aren't great. However, there are a couple of really good gems in season 1. Of course, we meet Angel. I am a Buffy Angel shipper, by the way. However, this is one of my points where I'm saying things are so different watching this show as an adult. Because personally, I believe that seasons 2 and 3 were the best seasons of Buffy. And I'm not sure that people would really rival that. I think amongst Buffy fandom, that is pretty much universally accepted. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. I actually really liked season 7 and the way that the show ended. But at the end of season 3, where Angel leaves, I distinctly remember when watching the show for the first time, not really being a fan of Angel leaving. I didn't like it. Obviously, Angel went off to do his own spin-off show. But at that point in time, I just didn't have, I guess, the life experience to really understand anything that was going on. And I remember having, don't get me wrong, I actually really love Joyce, Buffy's mum. But when Joyce, has the conversation with Angel about hoping that he cares enough about Buffy to let her move on, I have a distinct memory of really disliking Joyce in that moment and feeling like she overstepped the mark. However, as a 37-year-old, let's face it, I'm almost middle-aged now. Reflecting back on that conversation, I genuinely think Joyce was right. Perhaps she did overstep the boundaries and she probably should keep out of her daughter's relationship. But let's face it, Buffy and Angel were never going to be able to have a proper relationship because of the whole curse, one moment of pure happiness deal. And I know that they tried their best in season 3, but little cracks were appearing and it just was never going to work. So I think that was probably my biggest reflection, because I recall being really anti-Angel leaving. And watching it now, I think he did the best thing for Buffy. I do think maybe they sped it up a little bit too much, because it seemed like in the show, obviously they don't exactly have years to allow story arcs to unfold, but it seemed like after one conversation with Joyce, Angel is telling Buffy that he's doing a runner. So maybe that felt a little bit forced and rushed. But ultimately, I think Angel leaving was the right decision. Some other things that have really interested me is just how clever the foreshadowing has been in this show. And I'm not sure you pick it up on the first watch or even just watching individual episodes back. But when you watch the entire series again, you really pick up on how clever the writers have been. And look, I don't know how many years in advance they would have mapped out the series, because it seems like at the end of almost every year, there was always the possibility of Buffy getting cancelled. But it seems like there was some really clever foreshadowing going on, particularly with Willow's character, when she gets the whole doppelganger vamp, and she's obviously, well, not obviously, but potentially gay, and Willow makes the comment about this other Willow who's living in this alternative universe, and there's an off-the-cuff remark, and I think I'm kind of gay. So there's little instances of that. There was another episode I was watching the other week, I believe it was from season 4, where Faith, by the by, I'm not really a fan of Faith, and I know that that's a really unpopular opinion. I think she does redeem herself in the end in Buffy and in Angel, but ultimately I think she is a pain in the you-know-what. But anyhow, there is one scene in season 4 where Buffy and Faith are making the bed, and there's an off-the-cuff remark from Faith about little sis arriving. So that's just another instance of foreshadowing. And look, to be honest with you, I always kind of thought that season 4, if I'm being really honest with you, obviously there's always episodes that are remarkable, like Hush. But as a whole, as a story arc, I always thought that the whole initiative thing was such a bitter lemon, and it really didn't go down with me well upon the first watch. However, given everything that we've learned about potential corruption amongst governments and politicians and what they might be hiding, and if you're listening to this, you might be interested in all the stuff that's currently coming out about UFOs. It's actually pretty crazy. But anyhow, I am digressing. But in hindsight, the whole initiative season actually seems pretty good. I actually really enjoyed it a whole lot more than I recall on the first watch. Speaking of season 4, I have to be honest, I really like Tara. I don't really have any judgments or anything really to say about Willow being with Tara. However, I also really loved Oz. Again, that's another instance where Willow and Oz seemed like they were really rock solid. Then there was one episode with Veruca. Obviously, things happened with Veruca. I'm trying not to include too many spoilers here, but hey, it is what it is. It's hard to talk about the different season arcs without saying what's actually happened. And then Oz was basically off, and I believe he found himself in Tibet. Then he came back, figured out that Willow had, well, she was potentially in the process of moving on with Tara. I really would have loved to have seen what ended up happening with Oz. I really feel like Oz should have come back for season 7. Obviously, potentially Seth Green is a very successful actor and maybe it just wasn't possible to make happen. But I would have loved to have seen Oz come back in season 7. A couple of other little tidbits that I've picked up on while rewatching. I honestly have no idea why the writers never paired up Giles with anyone. I know Jenny Calendar appeared in season 2, but we all know what happened to her and that was quite fleeting. Probably a missed opportunity there, but hey, drama, writers, I get it. So Giles just never really has a companion throughout any of the seasons, and I think it would have been nice to actually explore that. Now, as I mentioned, I'm up to season 5, and I'm going to talk about a highly polarizing character, which is Dawn. Now, I, probably like you, do find Dawn annoying. Did find Dawn annoying, especially on the first watch. However, 2 episodes in, I can relate to her more now. And I'm actually really enjoying the advent of Dawn's character. I think it's actually, from a writing perspective, a really creative move. And if there's one thing about Buffy and the writers, I will say that they were never afraid to be bold with what they did. And I think pretty much plonking a brand new character 5 seasons into a show and acting like she'd always been there is a pretty brave move. And let's face it, Dawn's character was supposed to be annoying. So it actually was quite successful. If I was a Buffy writer looking on and looking at all the fandom, let's face it, Dawn is not a very well liked character, generally speaking. So I'm going to leave it there. I will say, I recall from my first viewing, I found season 5 to be pretty good. Season 6 would have to be my least favorite season of all of the seasons. I just thought that the trio was pretty pathetic. But hey, let's keep an open mind, and maybe upon rewatching season 6, I might have very different views. Season 7, I actually really loved. And I'm going to leave you with a comment that is not going to be popular at all, because I'm in all the Facebook groups and the Discord groups and I see what people say. I am not at all a fan. I may have to correct myself after watching the series all up again. But speaking as of the 8th of January 2025, I am not at all a fan of Spike turning good. Whether through the chip or the soul, I did not like that story arc at all. I think he should have stayed as a villain throughout. And I know I'm going to cop some hate for that. I also didn't like the whole Buffy and Spike romantic connection. I just thought it felt a bit forced to me, almost like the writers had run out of ideas. I mean, in saying that, I actually forgot to mention that as part of season 4, I actually really recall disliking Riley. However, Upon watching as an almost middle-aged woman, I can now see that Riley is actually quite solid and quite a good choice for Buffy. Now, in the grand scheme of things, potentially, I know that this is TV and things need to move on, but after what we were sold as the greatest love story of her life, Buffy and Angel, maybe it felt a little bit too quick for Buffy to move on in season 4 with Riley. But overall, I think Riley is a pretty good guy. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling on and leave it there. If you've got any comments, even if you disagree with anything that I've said, I'd love to hear it. Very open to having a discussion. I love Buffy. I can't ever see myself not loving Buffy. As I record this, there's a lot of talk about a reboot. If they did a reboot, I would be seriously excited. However, I would be lying if I said that there wasn't a little bit of fear inside of me that they're actually going to end up ruining the whole series by trying to reboot it. And I know that the comics exist, and from what I've heard, I mean, I have a few of the comics, but I haven't read them in their entirety. But the comics that I have read, there's some really out there stuff happening in the comics. So I hope if they do end up doing a reboot, they just pick it up after season 7 and pretend that the comics don't exist. Anyhow, if you've got any thoughts at all, if you yourself have done another rewatch nearing middle age or just later on in life, and you've come to the same realizations that I have, or maybe you have different realizations, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm going to leave it there. If you have any interest whatsoever in journaling, writing, body-based approaches to working with trauma, and look, this may sound like completely irrelevant. However, there was actually quite a lot of trauma throughout the 7 seasons of Buffy, if you think about all the different characters. Need I mention evil Willow? Anyhow, if you're interested in, like I said, journaling, writing, body-based approaches to working with trauma, you can check out more about my work. Sadly, I do not get paid for talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer all day, but you can check out my website, sarahkanata.com. Sarah is spelt conventionally with a H, so S-A-R-A-H. My last name is C-A-N-N-A-T-A, and on the end is .com. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed this episode.